Welcome into SportsMemo's betting podcast, college basketball Saturday edition with Brent Crow. Brent, welcome into the podcast. How are you?
Hey, Drew, doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. This is one of my favorite times to be doing the podcast. Early look at the Saturday college basketball card. We got 5 games slated with a best bet as well. So we're going to hopefully find some more winners than losers here on the Saturday look-aheads. And guys, we're recording this shortly after noon on the East Coast here. Brent, in the state of Alabama, I believe. I'm now in the Sunshine State of Florida. But either way, we're going to look at these 5 games. The lines are not out yet, so we're going to go off of Ken Palm's numbers and see if Brent or myself have a side or a total that might be worth a bet off the opener, or if you're listening to this on Saturday, maybe some value on Saturday morning before the games tip off. So let's start off at the top of the card here, Brent. We got 663, 664. SEC Big 12 Challenge game, Brent. Tennessee at Kansas. Looks like Ken Palm's numbers putting it 68-54 with the Jayhawks on top at home, which would be putting us at a total of just 122. Low total here. But Kansas seems to be controlling the pace and not many possessions in conference play, like we were just talking off recording here, Brent. Anything that interests you with the Vols in the Jayhawks if the total's 122 and what the Jayhawks are favored by 14 at home?
Yeah, 14 seems like a big number for Kansas. Of course, remember the last Kansas game, it ended with the brawl. Silvio De Sousa was suspended for 12 games. You know, he only plays about 10 minutes a game. That's not a big loss for Kansas. I mean, if it would have been Azubuike or Dotson, it would have been huge. But it just basically robs them of a little bit of depth. But what Kansas has done this year is play great defense. They're number 1 in the country, not Virginia. It's Kansas, number 1 in defensive efficiency right now. And you look at what they've done in conference games. I mean, every opponent or every victory, they've held their opponents below 60. The only time that they gave up more than 60 was the loss to Baylor, 67-55. And that's been about the score of a Kansas conference game, 66-57, something in that range. And I've made some money playing unders with Kansas, but I was playing under 128, maybe 130, and not 122. We're getting down there. I hope that this one goes up a little bit if you want to play it under. But Tennessee, sort of a similar Kansas team. They're number 1 in the SEC in defense right now, playing very slow. They're 13th in the conference in tempo and 307 nationally. And I think both of these teams are really similar in the fact that they don't have a whole lot of talent offensively. I mean, Tennessee's best player, Lamonte Turner, he basically retired after 11 games. He's going to sit out the rest of the year.
Is that what he did for real?
Yeah, he just said, I've had enough. He's had some injury problems, and I believe it was his shoulder. So he just said that's enough, and he can't play. He played 11 games, so no more eligibility after this year. But he just basically said he wasn't effective, and he was shooting 23% from 3 and 35% from 2. So, but he was the point guard, and they replaced him. They got a guy, I can't remember where he's from, Vescovi, who has stepped in. He would get granted eligibility. He's played 6 games as a starting point guard, and he's played pretty well. He's shooting 43% from 3. But, I mean, basically, you look at what Tennessee had last year with all those guys that could play, and then this year you had Turner and Bowden at the guard spots, and then nobody really can score in the front court for Tennessee. I mean, Yves Pons is probably their best player, and he's not that much of a factor. So it's a team that has really a lot of difficulty scoring. Players, under Rick Barnes, they're going to play great defense. They're 20th nationally for the season in defense. They're 4-2 in the SEC so far. Held Mississippi to 48 points in their last game. Vanderbilt only scored 45 in the game before that. So, Tennessee this year has to win on defense because, again, their offense just not that great. They're 139th in the country in efficiency on offense. So you compare that to Kansas. And Kansas, with Devon Dotson and Azubuike down low, 2 solid players, but everybody else kind of role players. Marcus Garrett's had a few flashes at the off-guard spot, but, not a typical Kansas team with a lot of pros and guys that can really score. So they hang their hat on defense. They play slow. number one in efficiency, like I said, defensively in the country. And, the formulas work. So you got these two teams get together, both of them defensive oriented, both of them play fairly slow. I mean, they'll take an obvious break, but for the most part, after a made bucket, they're going to walk it up and play in the half court. So I'm looking for a half court game. 122, though, especially when you consider there's a difference between conference games and non-conference games. I mean, in conference, when Kansas scouts their next opponent, West Virginia, Kansas State, Texas, whatever, they've seen them, they've scouted them all year long in conference play. They don't know, when they call a play, Kansas players know what's going to happen and vice versa. Well, now you're out of conference against Tennessee, kind of threw this game together. They've been in conference play. Now they got a game with a couple of days to prepare against Tennessee. You're not going to have that familiarity. There's going to be times where, they run plays that they've never seen before. And so you're going to get a little more offense in these games between these conferences in this period of time. At 122, I would actually lean to play it over a little bit, believe it or not. Tennessee, Rick Barnes last week said, he said, we're so bad in the half court offense, we got to start pushing the ball. And so, you didn't see that much difference. They scored 66 and 73 the two games since he said that. The possessions haven't really increased much. Maybe you got a freshman point guard playing in his seventh start in this one. I mean, they're not going to just run up and down the court, but they are trying to. But I have a feeling this total is going to come out at 120. If it opens 122, it's going to go to 125 or so, and it's probably a no man's land at 125. I would love to play it under, say, 128. And I would, at 120, I would play it over. But I think it's going to be, it's going to be a game right around this number, 67, 57, something like that.
And Brent, two questions for you. The first, Vescovi, the new point guard for Tennessee with Lamonte Turner, I guess retiring. Interesting. I didn't realize that was the case. But he's from Uruguay, actually. And I was thinking off the top of my head, man, European players playing college basketball. But Uruguay, obviously not a geography expert by any means, but in South America.
I believe that's South America, yeah.
Yeah. It's does that change anything, like philosophy-wise with I don't really know many players coming from South America. Would that change any part of your handicap here? Because we are kind of finding change with this only being his fifth game playing the point guard position for the Vols.
Well, I haven't seen, it doesn't look like any player from. I mean, you can't tell what continent he's from by the way he plays. I mean, like I said, I think he's been a little timid, and Barnes would like for him to press it a little bit. But, so far he's played pretty well. And like I said, shooting 43% from three. But, I think it's just, he's a freshman, and according to Rick Barnes, a little timid. So maybe, by the end of the season, he's opened it up a little bit. But for right now, I don't see, where he's from doesn't have anything to do with how he's playing.
Okay. The reason I brought up the European thing is because, with all the NBA European guys, there is a little bit of difference when you watch them play, just the way they grew up playing the sport. And I didn't know if maybe from a total's perspective or anything like that, if you could see any value with these kids coming over, or I guess coming up in this case and playing college basketball here.
Yeah, I just think it's a case-by-case basis. I mean, you've got some guys that are, they may be from France, but they could have grown up in Atlanta athletically. And then you've got guys from, Estonia or Bosnia or whatever that are stiff and not very quick. So, like I said, you just have to look at it player by player.
And then second question on your breakdown is talking about the totals. And I thought you made an interesting case in terms of preparation on defense. Is it something you think, the market, the odds makers off the open are factoring into these numbers? Or do you think in this SEC Big Ten Challenge, if you just bet it top to bottom, all of the games to the over, you think you'd make some money this weekend?
I would, if you just had to do it one way or another, I would bet overs before I would bet unders. In other words, I'm not going to do it just blanketly bet all the overs, but I'm kind of predisposed to look at I think you may have three 3 or 4 points of value because of the unfamiliarity, as opposed to making a total just based on raw numbers.
That makes sense. Okay. So yeah, possibly a little bit of value there in this SEC versus Big Ten challenge. Talk with Brent Crow here, mainstay on SportsMemo.com. We got 665, 666 up next. AAC battle here. SMU versus Memphis. Looks like Ken Palm's numbers showing Memphis 73, SMU 68. So would put us at a total of 141 here, Brent. If Memphis comes out 5-point favorites with a total of 141, any interest in betting this AAC matchup?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting game, simply to see what Memphis does. I mean, I don't know if you watched their last outing, but man, it was a disaster against Tulsa, as Memphis was just manhandled. 80-40 they lost, and it was 73 possessions. I mean, they scored almost a half a point per possession, just a little over. And this has been a team that's pretty decent offensively at times, but wow, they really struggled against Tulsa on the road. And it hadn't been a road thing. I mean, they had road wins against Tennessee and South Florida, UAB. I mean, it was just an absolute egg that Memphis laid against Tulsa, and I think they're going to bounce back on their home court. Penny Hardaway is going to have them ready to play against SMU, which has been, I think, quite a surprise really for this season. SMU at 14-4, they're 4-2 in the AAC. Not really any good wins though. I mean, if you look at their non-conference schedule, their best win was a win against UNLV. And in conference play, their best win is Temple. So, they're 14-4, but they have not. The only time they really stepped up in class was against Houston, which was a loss, and against Georgetown, which was also a 17-point loss on their home court. So, despite the gaudy 14-4 record by SMU, I just, I think there's several teams out there right now that didn't play anybody and made some nice. Had some nice wins to build their record, and then once they played somebody, they got hammered. St. Bonaventure's won. You look at what they had done, and then they play BCU and Dayton back-to-back and get blown out in both games. And I think that may be the case here. SMU may be running into a buzzsaw. Memphis at 5 on their home court, I think is probably a live play here. As like I said, I mean, when you score 40 and to get doubled up, there's going to be some motivation coming out, and then you've got an SMU team that's not as good as their 14-4 record. So I look for Memphis to come back with a good effort tomorrow.
Makes a lot of sense there, Brent. Let's head to the next SEC versus Big 12 challenge game. A good one here. We got Kentucky in Lubbock taking on Texas Tech. Two big-name coaches, John Calipari, mainstay there at Kentucky. And we're seeing Texas Tech, Chris Beard and company, 67-64. So -3 for the Red Raiders at home, putting us at a total of 131. If those are the numbers at the opener, Brent, any interest in betting the Wildcats and Red Raiders?
Well, Texas Tech's been kind of inconsistent. They're 12-6, and they had a good win against Louisville, but their other wins have all been against cupcakes. I mean, other than Louisville, their best win is Iowa State, but they had opportunities against Iowa, Creighton, DePaul, Baylor, West Virginia. Came up short in all of those games. This is a brand new team from last year. Kyler Edwards returned. He's having a decent season. I mean, David Moretti is having a good year, hitting 38% from 3. And I don't know, though. It just doesn't seem like this team has put it together yet. I mean, they may. I mean, Chris Beard has a proven track record. Last year's run was remarkable, but just a lot of inconsistency from Texas Tech so far this season, including, you just look at their last game, an 11-point loss on the road to TCU in a game that, I mean, they really never were in it. I mean, it wasn't a complete blowout, but, TCU had control throughout the game. Kentucky at 14-4, 5-1 in conference play. It seems like they're starting to play a little better. You look at their last 5 games in conference play, they've scored in the 70s every game. They've picked the tempo up. It seems like the players are getting more comfortable on offense for Kentucky, and they still play pretty solid defense. They're 42nd in the nation in defense. And I think this is a team that, you've seen it before with Kentucky. When you start all over every year, you got all these guys that are freshmen and maybe a grad transfer or two thrown in, and yeah, they start playing in Calipari's system, and they struggle it for a while. I mean, they have glimpses early. They did beat Michigan State to open the season, but then they lose to Evansville and lost to Utah, lost to Ohio State. But since that Ohio State loss, 6-1, beating Louisville, Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia a couple of times. They did have a hiccup on the road against South Carolina, but I think this team's growing and getting better, and more so than Texas Tech. I'm still waiting to see that Texas Tech team put it all together. Maybe they do here, but if I get 3 with Kentucky, I got to take the Wildcats here.
Well, and Brent, yeah, I mean, with Kentucky, like you said, we see it every year. I mean, John Calipari, say whatever you want about him, maybe being a scumbag off the court, but talking about coaching basketball with young guys, I mean, he makes them better throughout the season. Would you not agree?
Definitely. I think that is a very true statement.
And also, just talking about Kentucky's last game against Georgia, I mean, they look good, winning by 10. Have you seen anything here? I know, you follow the SEC pretty strongly, but with Anthony Edwards for Georgia, why isn't Georgia, in your opinion, at least kind of making a run here at being a tournament team? And do you think they can kind of turn that around in the second half of the season?
They've been very disappointing. I mean, they're 1-4 in conference play. Of course, 2 losses to Kentucky. They also lost on the road against Auburn, got blown out at Mississippi State. I mean, they've got talent. Anthony Edwards could possibly be the number 1 pick in the draft. Rayshawn Hammonds is pretty good, but, Severe Wheeler is a freshman point guard he's got potential. Tyree Crump he's a guy. I mean, nothing special. I mean, it's just, they just don't have enough talent, I don't think. I mean, Edwards and Hammond's solid, but otherwise, I think they're still missing a few pieces. And, Tom Crean, I don't know if where he ranks as amongst coaches. I mean, he's had some good years at Marquette. Again, of course, that was in Conference USA, and then he had 3 pretty good years in the Big East. He goes to Indiana, 3 straight losing seasons, turned it around, had a couple of really nice years, and kind of middled for his last 4 years. And then at Georgia, he goes 11-21 last year, 11-7 this year. And I'm not sure that that I think the program's probably better with Crean than it has been in the last few coaches, but I'm not sure he's the guy that's going to take them and turn them into a top 25 team. Now, you get, if you can recruit a couple of Anthony Edwards every year, that's going to help. But, I'm not sure he's the X's and O's guy and whatever. And they're going to be, I think this team's dangerous. They always will be dangerous with that, with the player of the caliber of Edwards. We saw what he did. What was it in the tournament in Hawaii where they played Michigan State? He had like 40, single-handedly got him in the game, and of course they wound up losing that one. But he was very impressive then. But he's kind of been quiet in SEC play.
Brent, next game up, we got arguably the best game of the weekend here. Number 1 ranked Baylor Bears on the road in Gainesville, talking SEC versus Big 12 Challenge game again. Baylor at Florida. Ken Palm's numbers showing 65-64, which would make the Bears a 1-point road favorite. That's got to be circled as watch out this year in college basketball. 129 being the total here. Baylor versus Florida. If you have any interest in betting this, Baylor -1, total of 129.
Yeah, I tell you what, it has been a curse to be number 1 this year, and really just a top 5 ranked team and be on the road, especially against a good team. We saw it again last night. Indiana beat Michigan State. I would not be surprised if Florida beat Baylor here. Florida, again, they've been up and down. They've got some games where you just cringe. Like when you look at it, how do you lose to Missouri by 16 points and give up 91 to the Tigers? That's just what? You do a double take in that one. But then again, they had a really close game against LSU Tuesday and a 2-point road loss. I thought they played well, but last Saturday, 69-47 blowout of Auburn. That was very impressive what they did to Auburn. They have potential. I think again though, Florida is kind of like Georgia, but maybe better coached. I don't think they have the horses to really make a run to the Final Four or anything. I mean, Nembhard's been decent. Kerry Blackshear's pretty good, but they still have some holes in this lineup and not a whole lot of depth. And I mean, they're a good, solid team, and I think Mike White's a better coach than Tom Crean, so they're going to be better overall than Georgia is. But the way college basketball is now, I mean, you have to really hunt to find teams where you can say they got 5 really good players. I mean, a lot of teams have 2 or 3, maybe 4, but it's not like it used to be where you had 5 guys that were, possibly NBA picks anymore. And it's not, I think the most important thing that has hurt college basketball is players just go to the NBA after a year. I mean, you look at some of the guys that are starring in the NBA right now that should be in college or could be in college. It's amazing when you look at who could still be in college that are playing in the league right now. So, but in this one, like I said, I'm not surprised if Florida wins here. Baylor has been solid, but I mean, you really look at that Baylor lineup, and they got some solid pieces, no superstars. I think that Scott Drew does a nice job, and they've won, 14 or 15 in a row now, but they've had some scares. I mean, even the last time out Monday against Oklahoma had a wide open 3 to beat them with about 6 or 7 seconds left after a Baylor turnover that missed, and then Baylor wound up with getting fouled 1 by 4. The game prior against Oklahoma State on the road, it was a struggle before they wound up with a 7-point win. They've got a nice win at Kansas, and also a nice road win against Texas Tech. Had a 1-point home win against Butler. I mean, as far as resume goes, Baylor deserves to be number 1, no question about it. But they're not going to continue to run the table. This is a tough game, different environment, out of their comfort area on the road against Florida, which can, the Swamp can get pretty loud in basketball too. And I think, like I said, that it wouldn't be surprising to see another number 1 fall here.
Man, so if the price tag does come out, Baylor pick'em or Baylor -1 here, you would actually look to be betting the Gators?
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Brent Crow looking at Florida at home on Saturday. We got one more game here, guys. Late night edition. Pac-12 action. Washington at Colorado. Rotation number 783, 784, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific tip. Ken Palm's numbers showing Colorado, the Buffs 68, Washington 62. This one in Boulder. Total of 130. So if we get a total of 130 here, Brent, in Colorado, the Buffs -6 at home. You got any interest in betting this one?
Well, Colorado, in their last game Thursday night, they just demolished Washington State 78-56. That was a game that I had a play on the over, which I had 138, 137. And it winds up 134, but with 12 minutes to go, Drew, it's 109. If you bet totals, I always look at games at the 15-minute mark, do the projections, the 12-minute mark. If it's 110 or 109 at 12 minutes, I'm pretty sure that one's going to go over 150. But you know what happened? Washington State scores 6 points in 12 minutes, and Colorado did their part, they wound up with 78. Washington State only 56, so wound up with a tough loss there. But I also had bet Colorado because 2 reasons. First of all, they were off a 21-point loss on the road to Arizona in their last game, and also Washington State was off the 2 biggest wins they've had in forever. They had the Klay Thompson night, and they beat Oregon State, scored 89 points. Prior to that, they had beaten Oregon, a double-digit win over Oregon. And, Washington State, they ain't had many good wins lately under Ernie Kent. So Kyle Smith comes in this year, and you can see a little progress. I mean, I think they're still lacking talent, but, they're 3-4 in conference play. I thought that was a great spot to play against Colorado on Thursday. And now you've got a Washington team that lost Quade Green to academics, and since that happened, they have hit the skids. They are now 2-5 in conference play. They've blown leads. They blew a lead against Utah last night. They blew a lead against Oregon Saturday night at home and lost in overtime. They lost to Cal on the road last week. I mean, they have 2. They're basically, and to me, the most baffling performance of the Pac-10 season so far was the opener against UCLA on January the 2nd. They did have Quaddy Green in that one. They were at full strength. UCLA comes in, and one guy, they had a freshman that had made, I think he had made 4 threes for the season, hit 7 in the game, and UCLA leaves Washington with a straight-up 66-64 win. And then after that, they bounced back with a win over USC, 72-40. I thought, okay, they righted the ship, but then they lose Quade Green, and it has been misery for Washington ever since. They can't score. They're playing good defense. Of course, they play that Syracuse zone, the 22nd in the country, 45th in three-point field goal percentage allowed. I mean, solid zone defense, but the problem is they shoot 32% from 3. They're not very efficient offensively, turn it over 21% of the time. And, I mean, they just have had a tough time scoring points. 66 points is their high for their last 5 games, only 1 win there. Now you got to go to Colorado after you play in Utah, and everybody talks about that transition. Of course, you go from altitude to altitude. It's going to be tough. I think Colorado's another good home team to look at here. And at 6, I would lay 6 with Colorado in the heartbeat against this Washington team that is really, really struggling right now.
All right, so in the late night edition, Colorado there at the end, we got a best bet coming up here, guys, from Brent Crow. He's 10-3, his last 13 picks, so heating up here at SportsMemo.com, and we got a special coupon code here for the podcast, 30 off. That's 30 OFF at checkout. 30 off. We'll take $30 off Brent Crow's 7-day all-access pass, which is already discounted to just $79. So for under $50, you can get the next 7 days all-access pass with Brent Crow for only $49. Check it out, sportsmemo.com. 7-day all-access, 30 off for Brent Crow. You can use that for Drew Martin as well, so you can get both for under 100 for the next 7 days. A lot of college basketball. If you're into college basketball picks, want to get an advantage over the odds makers, perceived advantage anyway, use the coupon code 30 off at checkout. 7-day all access, sportsmemo.com for Brent Crow or Drew Martin at checkout. Brent, man, great breakdowns on these 5 games, and let's leave the listeners with a best bet for the podcast.
Well, we'll go back to that Baylor-Florida game, Drew. I talked about liking Florida. I'm also going to bet the under if it's anywhere near 129, which is what Ken Palm's showing. And I know that these teams are not familiar with one another, but I also know how good defensively Baylor is, how good defensively Florida is, and how slow this game's going to be. You're going to see both teams walking it up, a lot of half court, and I think it's going to be a struggle for either team to reach 60 in this one. So I'm going to call for a Florida upset that doesn't contain a lot of scoring.
All right, and just to I guess go after the analysis here, is this the Big 12 SEC Challenge? So the over philosophy, you would kind of kick that in terms of these teams defensively not. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and the main thing is the value of. I mean, you look at the number. I have this one at 122. So if they're going to put up 129, I'm betting it under. And then like with the Kansas-Tennessee game, if it was 129, I'm definitely betting it under. I mean, the numbers are everything with totals, and I think there's value at 129. And I think if they post a 129 on this game, it's going to be short-lived.
Okay, and just for the record, we're going for the best bet. It's the Gators, though. It's not the total, right?
I like the under better. The under is the best bet.
Okay, and do you have a number where it would not be, recommended to bet?
I would like 125, 126.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, we're going on projections here. It's at 129. I don't think it will close 129. Sometimes I'm wrong and people see other things that I don't see. I mean, I had a game last night that I wound up betting Indiana under, and the line moved to the over. So, and that's why I played it under at 144. So, maybe in this one somebody likes the over and bets it to 132, and we'll get an extra 3-pointer cushion with our under.
All right, Brent. Hey, great podcast like always, man. We're doing this Fridays about the Saturday college basketball card. But, Brent, anything else you want to throw out before we shut this down?
That's it. Like I said, been heating up. I had a tough loss last night, but still 10-3 in my last 13. And look to I love January college basketball. And from now until the conference tournament start, I think there's a lot of money to be made.
All right, guys. He's Brent Crow. I'm Drew Martin. Have a fun, safe weekend. Best of luck with your bets, and we'll talk on Monday.